Sir, building security says you're trying to access the executive floors without clearance. You can't just walk in here.
I wasn't trying to access anything. I work here.
They don't have you listed as staff. Why don't you tell me what you're really doing?
I'm not staff. I'm the new CEO. First day.
Right, and I'm the mayor. Let's see some ID. Stand by.
Your ass.
The morning was quiet, the kind of quiet that exists only before something irreversible happens. 6:47 a.m. The glass towers of downtown Atlanta caught the first light of February like mirrors. Cold, reflective, indifferent. The revolving doors of Meridian Capital Group's headquarters spun slowly for the early arrivals. Administrative assistants, junior analysts, security staff pulling the overnight shift into the dawn hours, coffee cups, access badges, the ordinary machinery of a Monday morning. And then a man walked up, tall, composed, dressed in a charcoal Tom Ford suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. A leather portfolio tucked under one arm, a phone pressed to his ear, finishing a call with quiet authority. He moved like someone who had somewhere important to be, because he did. His name was Darius Ellison, and in approximately 4 hours, he would be introduced to the entire company as their new chief executive officer. But first, he had to get through the door. He never made it. Not because he forgot his ID, not because the system was down, not because of any legitimate procedural issue that a reasonable person could defend. He was stopped because of what he looked like. And what followed, in the next 47 minutes, would cost one of Atlanta's most prestigious financial firms over $12 million, trigger a federal investigation, and spark a national conversation that would trend for 11 consecutive days. Before we continue, what city are you watching from? If this is your first time here, support the channel by liking and subscribing. Stories like this need to be heard, and with your help, we can make sure these events don't go unheard. Because this one cuts deep. To understand what happened on that sidewalk in front of Meridian Capital's flagship headquarters, you first have to understand who Darius Ellison was before he ever set foot in Atlanta. You have to go back to Decatur, Georgia, a 2-bedroom house on Candler Road, a mother who worked double shifts at Grady Memorial Hospital and still found time to quiz her son on ESSAT vocabulary words at the kitchen table at 10 p.m. A father who ran a small contracting business and who told Darius the same thing every single morning before school. You will have to be twice as good to get half the credit, so be 4 times as good. Darius listened. By 16, he was running a small bookkeeping operation for 3 local businesses in his neighborhood, learning QuickBooks from YouTube tutorials and a library copy of Accounting Made Simple. His high school economics teacher, a woman named Mrs. Patricia Okafor, told him in front of the entire class that he had a mind for finance that she hadn't seen in 22 years of teaching. He graduated top of his class, full academic scholarship to Morehouse College, then a master's in business administration from Wharton, one of 11 black students in his cohort of 240. He didn't just survive Wharton, he thrived. He was recruited before graduation by Goldman Sachs, turned down 2 other offers, and spent the next 8 years learning the architecture of institutional wealth from the inside out. At 31, he made partner at Vantage Equity Advisors, the youngest partner in the firm's history. At 34, he led the restructuring of a mid-sized regional bank that had hemorrhaged value during the pandemic, returning it to profitability in 14 months, when the industry average for similar turnarounds was 32. He was profiled in Forbes, featured in Black Enterprise, invited to speak at Davos. The board of Meridian Capital Group, a firm managing over $4 billion in assets, had spent 8 months courting Darius Ellison. 8 months of negotiations, presentations, due diligence, dinners, and deliberation before unanimously voting him in as their new CEO. He was 38 years old. He was extraordinary. And on the morning of February 14th, none of that mattered. Not one credential, not one accomplishment, not one word of his record. Because when Darius Ellison walked up to that building, the only thing that the man at the security desk saw was a black man who, in his judgment, didn't belong there. Let's paint this scene with precision, because the details matter. Meridian Capital Group occupies the top 14 floors of the Harmon Tower on Peachtree Street, a 42-story glass and steel monument to Atlanta's financial ascent. The lobby is the kind of space designed to communicate power before a single word is spoken. 30-foot ceilings, imported Italian marble floors the color of cream and bone, a reception desk made of backlit onyx, 2 large circular security stations flanking the main entrance, each staffed around the clock. It is, by every measure, a place that announces itself. The security team at Harmon Tower was contracted through Sentinel Protective Services, a third-party firm that had held the building's security contract for 11 years. The officers wore Navy uniforms with silver badges. They had access control authority. They could grant or deny entry, and they had, on the record, received complaints before. 3 in the previous 2 years, to be specific. All 3 involved Black visitors or tenants being questioned disproportionately compared to white counterparts. All 3 were logged. All 3 were, according to Sentinel's internal records, addressed and resolved internally. They were not resolved, they were filed. There is a difference. The officer working the North Security Station that morning was a man named Kevin Draper, 44 years old, 11 years with Sentinel, a man who, by all outward appearances, knew this building and its rhythms. He knew the regulars, he knew the faces, he had a system. His words, captured later in a deposition, for identifying who fit the environment and who needed to be verified. Darius Ellison stepped through the revolving door at 6:51 a.m. He approached the security desk. He smiled, the kind of professional, measured smile of someone on the first day of the most important chapter of their career. He said, "Good morning, Darius Ellison. I'm starting today." And Kevin Draper looked at him, looked at his suit, looked at his portfolio, and said, "Deliveries go around the side entrance." Stop. Read that again. Deliveries go around the side entrance. Not, "Can I help you?" Not, "Do you have an appointment?" Not, "Let me check our system." Not any of the procedural courtesies extended to the parade of white men in suits who had walked through those same revolving doors every single morning for the past decade. A delivery entrance for a man in a Tom Ford suit carrying a leather portfolio, a man who had just stepped out of a black car service, a man with no packages, no dolly, no uniform, no clipboard. The only variable, the only one, was the color of his skin. Darius paused. He had navigated rooms like this his entire life. He knew exactly what was happening. He had a name for it, a history with it, a practiced response to it. He kept his voice level. He kept his body language open. He had done this before. The exhausting, invisible labor of being a black man in a predominantly white professional space, constantly managing how his presence was perceived just to be allowed to exist in it. He said calmly, "I'm not making a delivery. I'm the new CEO. I start today. My name is Darius Ellison." Draper didn't flinch. He actually laughed, not loudly, not cruelly, just a small, dismissive sound. The kind of laugh that says, "I've heard everything," buddy, without any of the self-awareness to understand what it reveals. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step aside. I have people to process." Darius stepped aside. He pulled out his phone. He had the HR onboarding email. He had the offer letter. He had the direct cell number of Meridian's chief human resources officer, a woman named Sandra Cho, who had personally coordinated his start date. He showed Draper the email. Draper glanced at it and said, and these words were captured in full on building CCTV audio, "Anyone can put together an email, sir. I need you to have a verified access badge or an escort. Those are the rules." The rules for the CEO, who no one had thought to give a badge to yet, because it was his first day, because he was supposed to be walked up by the executive team, who wouldn't arrive for another hour and 40 minutes. The system had no provision for this, or rather, the system had never imagined this problem because the system had never imagined this man. Darius called Sandra Cho, voicemail. He called the board's executive liaison, a man named Philip Garrett. It rang 7 times, no answer. It was 6:54 in the morning. By now, 2 other security officers had migrated toward the North Station. Whether out of curiosity or protocol response to what Draper had apparently flagged as a situation, they were there. 3 uniforms, 1 man in a suit, the lobby marble floor between them, a junior analyst named Chloe Watkins, 26, third month at the firm, walked through the revolving doors and was waved through immediately with a nod and a morning, Chloe. She didn't even break stride. Darius watched it happen. He said quietly to Draper, "You just waved her through without checking anything." Draper said, "She's an employee. So am I." "Sir, I don't have you in the system because it's my first day. I understand that, but call upstairs. Call anyone. Call the executive floor and ask if Darius Ellison is expected today." Draper's jaw tightened. "Sir, I'm not going to be spoken to like that." Darius had not raised his voice, not once. He had not moved aggressively. He had not threatened. He had not cursed. He had done everything that every manual for surviving these encounters tells you to do. Stay calm, stay compliant, document everything. He was the picture of restraint in the face of something designed to make a person lose their composure. Because if he lost his composure, he would become the story, not the injustice, him. He knew that. He had always known that. So he stood there in the lobby of the company he had been hired to lead, locked out of his own building on his first day, while employees flowed past him like a river around a stone. And then Kevin Draper did something that crossed every conceivable line. He called the Atlanta Police Department. He reported, quote, "a black male in the lobby, approximately 6'1", claiming to be an executive, refusing to leave when asked." Darius had not been asked to leave, not once. He had been asked to step aside, and he had. He had been asked to wait, and he had. He had attempted every legitimate avenue of verification available to him at 6:54 a.m. on a Monday, with no one from the executive team yet in the building, and he had been criminalized for it. 2 Atlanta PD officers arrived at 7:08 a.m. Darius called Sandra Cho voicemail. He called the board's executive liaison, a man named Philip Garrett. It rang 7 times, no answer. It was 6:54 in the morning. By now, 2 other security officers had migrated toward the North Station. Whether out of curiosity or a protocol response to what Draper had apparently flagged as a situation, they were there. 3 uniforms, 1 man in a suit, the lobby marble floor between them. A junior analyst named Chloe Watkins, 26, third month at the firm, walked through the revolving doors and was waved through immediately with a nod and a "morning, Chloe." She didn't even break stride. Darius watched it happen. He said quietly to Draper, "You just waved her through without checking anything." Draper said, "She's an employee. So am I. Sir, I don't have you in the system because it's my first day. I understand that, but call upstairs. Call anyone. Call the executive floor and ask if Darius Ellison is expected today." Draper's jaw tightened. "Sir, I'm not going to be spoken to like that." Darius had not raised his voice, not once. He had not moved aggressively. He had not threatened. He had not cursed. He had done everything that every manual for surviving these encounters tells you to do. Stay calm. Stay compliant. Document everything. He was the picture of restraint in the face of something designed to make a person lose their composure. Because if he lost his composure, he would become the story, not the injustice, him. He knew that. He had always known that. So he stood there, in the lobby of the company he had been hired to lead, locked out of his own building on his first day, while employees flowed past him like a river around a stone. And then, Kevin Draper did something that crossed every conceivable line. He called the Atlanta Police Department. He reported, quote, "a black male in the lobby, approximately 6'1", claiming to be an executive, refusing to leave when asked." Darius had not been asked to leave, not once. He had been asked to step aside, and he had. He had been asked to wait, and he had. He had attempted every legitimate avenue of verification available to him at 6:54 a.m. on a Monday with no one from the executive team yet in the building. And he had been criminalized for it. 2 Atlanta PD officers arrived at 7:08 a.m. Here's where the story detonates. Chloe Watkins, the junior analyst who had been waved through without a second glance, had watched the entire exchange from the coffee station in the lobby's east corridor. She had recognized something was wrong within the first 2 minutes. She had pulled out her phone. She recorded 11 minutes and 43 seconds of footage. She captured Draper's dismissal. The arrival of the second and third officers, the body language, the contrast, stark, undeniable, between how she had been treated 60 seconds before Darius arrived and how he was being treated now. She captured the silence after Torres's phone call. She captured Draper looking at the floor. She did not post it immediately. She was scared. She was 26. She had been at the firm for 3 months. She went upstairs, sat at her desk, and stared at the footage for 4 hours. At 11:15 a.m., as the company-wide email was going out announcing Darius Ellison as the new CEO, with a photo of him shaking hands with the board chairman, Chloe Watkins posted 11 minutes and 43 seconds of video to her personal social media. The caption read simply, "This happened in our lobby this morning. The man they're blocking, he's the new CEO, just found out. I'm shaking." Within 6 hours, the video had been viewed 14 million times. By midnight, it had crossed 40 million. By Tuesday morning, the New York Times, CNN, the BBC, and Al Jazeera were all running the story. Kevin Draper's name was known in every time zone on Earth. The corporate machinery, when it moves, moves fast, especially when it's trying to outrun a story. Meridian Capital's PR team issued a statement within 18 hours. The language was careful, measured, deeply insufficient. We are aware of an incident that occurred on the morning of February 14th involving our incoming CEO, Mr. Darius Ellison. We take matters of equity and inclusion with the utmost seriousness and are conducting a full internal review. The internet was not satisfied. Within 24 hours, a Change.org petition demanding Kevin Draper's termination and a full independent investigation had gathered over 300,000 signatures. The hashtag #LetTheBossIn trended for 11 consecutive days. Civil rights organizations, including the NAACP and the National Urban League, issued formal statements and demanded accountability not just from Sentinel Protective Services, but from Meridian Capital itself for the systemic conditions that allowed the incident to occur. Because here was the question no one was letting go of. Why wasn't Darius Ellison in the system? Why hadn't the building's security been briefed about the incoming CEO, a man who had been hired 8 months in advance, whose start date had been set for weeks? Why was there no protocol for his arrival? Was it an oversight? Was it negligence? Or was it something more insidious? A company so unaccustomed to imagining a black man in the CEO chair that the infrastructure for his arrival simply hadn't been constructed. The attorneys smelled blood. Within 72 hours of the video going viral, civil rights attorney Dominique Pierce, known for 7-figure racial discrimination settlements across the Southeast, had announced she was representing Darius Ellison in an investigation of potential civil rights violations. The legal complaint filed in the Northern District of Georgia named 3 parties: Kevin Draper individually, Sentinel Protective Services as employer, and Meridian Capital Group as the premises owner responsible for contractor conduct. The complaint alleged racial profiling, unlawful detention, and deliberate infliction of emotional distress. It cited the 3 previous complaints against Sentinel, the ones that had been filed and forgotten, as evidence of a pattern. Sentinel Protective Services placed Kevin Draper on administrative leave within 48 hours. By day 5, he was terminated. Their public statement said the termination was for conduct inconsistent with company policy and professional standards. It did not use the word racism, but the lawsuit did. Discovery is a brutal process. When Dominique Pierce's team began pulling records, they found something that turned a bad story into an indictment. Sentinel Protective Services had, in the 11 years they'd held the Harmon Tower contract, documented 47 security incidents involving visitors or tenants. Of those 47, 31, 66%, involved black individuals. The building's black tenant and visitor population, according to building management's own demographic data, represented approximately 23% of daily foot traffic. Do the math. 23% of the people, 66% of the incidents. The disparity was not subtle. It was not explainable by coincidence or probability or any neutral force. It was, in the language of civil rights law, a pattern of discriminatory enforcement. The attorney submitted those numbers to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. They submitted them to the Georgia Office of Civil Rights. They submitted them to the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. The DOJ opened a preliminary inquiry. Sentinel Protective Services, facing the weight of 11 years of documentation now working against them, made the calculation that companies in these situations always eventually make. They settled $4.2 million, paid to Darius Ellison for damages, emotional distress, reputational exposure, and what the settlement language called the exceptional circumstances of the incident. Meridian Capital, whose failure to adequately prepare for their own CEO's arrival and whose contractor selection practices were now under scrutiny, settled separately. $7.8 million, plus mandatory bias training for all staff and contractors, plus the implementation of a new equity and access protocol for all building vendors, a policy now referred to internally and somewhat grimly as the Ellison Protocol. Total, $12 million for 47 minutes for a man who never raised his voice. On February 28, 2 weeks after the incident, Darius Ellison walked into Meridian Capital Group's headquarters for the second time. The revolving doors spun. The marble floors gleamed. The security station was staffed by a different officer, a woman named Janelle, who had been briefed, who had his photo, who had his badge ready and extended it with a professional nod and a "Good morning, Mr. Ellison." He thanked her. He rode the elevator to the 41st floor. He walked into the boardroom where 7 board members stood as he entered. He sat at the head of the table, and he said, according to 3 people present who later spoke to the press, the following: "Let's get to work. No dramatics, no speech about what happened, no performance of resilience for their comfort." He simply sat down and did the job he had always been qualified to do. His first quarter as CEO saw Meridian's asset portfolio grow by 8%. His second quarter, 12%. By the end of his first year, the firm had opened 2 new offices, expanded its diversity executive pipeline program, and been named one of Fortune's 100 best companies to work for the first time in its history. The man they tried to keep out of the building became the reason people wanted to be in it. Chapter 11. What this reveals. Now let's be uncomfortable for a moment, because this story is easy to watch and feel righteous about. It's easy to look at Kevin Draper and place all the weight of this incident on his shoulders, to say one bad actor, one isolated case, one man's bias, to let the settlement close the chapter and call it resolved, but that would be a lie of omission. Kevin Draper did not create the conditions that made his assumption possible. He operated within them. He was produced by a culture, a professional culture, a national culture, in which a black man in a suit in a financial tower is still, in the year we're living in, more readily read as a threat than as a leader, in which the cognitive reflex of "he doesn't belong here" fires before any conscious evaluation occurs. He didn't invent that reflex. He inherited it and he deployed it. And so did the system that employed him and failed to train him and failed to correct him and filed 3 prior complaints in a drawer and called it resolution. Here's the question that should keep you up. How many Darius Ellisons never made it to the boardroom? How many men and women, equally qualified, equally accomplished, equally deserving, didn't have the composure or the documentation or the camera or the attorney or the fortune of a viral moment to rescue them from a system designed, consciously or not, to keep them outside? How many times does a person have to prove they belong before belonging is simply assumed? What does it cost a person, not in dollars but in dignity, to spend a lifetime being twice as good and still getting stopped at the door? And here's the one that cuts deepest. If Chloe Watkins hadn't pressed record, if those 11 minutes and 43 seconds had never existed, would any of this have mattered? Would Darius Ellison's word have been enough? Or would he have simply become another complaint filed in another drawer? There is a photograph. It circulated widely in the days after the settlement was announced. It was taken by a staff photographer at Meridian Capital for the company's internal newsletter, the kind of image that was never supposed to become iconic. It shows Darius Ellison at his desk on the 41st floor, floor-to-ceiling windows behind him. Atlanta spread out beneath him in every direction. Peachtree Street, the Harmon Tower lobby 40 floors below, the revolving doors, the marble floor, the security station where 47 minutes of his life were taken from him without justification. He's looking at a document. He's not looking at the camera, he's just working. And somewhere in that image, in his posture, in his focus, in the absolute refusal to let any of it define the totality of who he is, there is something that the settlement cannot capture and the headlines cannot contain. He is still there. They tried to keep him out. He runs the building. But here's the thing about that photo, the thing that should sit with you, that should follow you into your day, into your assumptions, into the way you move through spaces and read the people around you. That photo only exists because of what happened in the lobby. And for every person who sees it and feels inspired, there is a person who never made it far enough to be photographed, who was turned away and questioned and worn down and never came back, and we will never know their names. We will never know what they could have built. We only know what was taken. The door was always his. The question is why he had to fight to open it. If this story moved you, drop a comment with your city and tell me what you're thinking. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. The algorithm buries stories like this. Your share is the only way they survive. Hit like, subscribe, and stay locked in, because next week, we're going into another story they tried to make disappear. You don't want to miss it.